male influences. From early on, I heard Nat Cole, I heard Bull Moose Jackson, and Louis Jordan, love Louis Jordan. I heard Billy, Mr. B. I mean, he was just, my father thought Billy Eckstine was like, he walked on water, and he loved me.
Nancy Wilson was called the girl with the honey-coated voice, a singer whose elegance and phrasing made her one of the most beloved vocalists of the 20th century. She sold millions of records, won Grammy Awards, hosted her own television show, and performed on the world's biggest stages. To audiences, she was glamorous, untouchable, a star who could make a single lyric sound like a whispered secret. But behind the applause, there was another Nancy, the mother who raced home between tours to check homework, the woman who once said, "The stage was my second home, but my first home was always with my children." For the world, she was a jazz and pop icon. For Kenneth Jr., Samantha, and Sheryl, she was simply Mom, trying to juggle platinum records with PTA meetings, dazzling gowns with quiet family dinners. So what really happened to the kids who grew up in the shadow of Nancy Wilson's fame? How did they navigate life with a mother the world adored? And where are they today? Nancy Sue Wilson was born on February 20th, 1937, in the quiet town of Chillicothe, Ohio. She was the eldest of 6 children, a role that would shape her sense of responsibility early in life. Her father worked long hours in the steel mills, while her mother ran the household. They didn't have much, but what they lacked in wealth, they made up for in music. Nancy would later reflect, "We were poor in money, but rich in music and love." Music was her escape and her calling. By the age of 4, Nancy was already singing solos in the church choir. Members of the congregation would stop her parents to marvel at the little girl with the grown-up voice. She remembered, "People told me I sounded older than I was, like I had already lived the blues." Her passion deepened as she listened to the records that spun endlessly on her family's phonograph. Nat King Cole, Dinah Washington, Billy Eckstine. These were her early teachers. "I learned phrasing from Nat, attitude from Dinah, and smoothness from Billy," she once explained. At 15, Nancy entered a local talent contest. When she walked out onto the stage, she was just a shy teenager in a simple dress. But the moment she sang, the audience fell silent. She won the contest, and with it, her first opportunity to appear on television in a show called Skyline Melodies. Nancy recalled, "That was the first time I realized people really listened when I sang. That's when I thought, maybe this could be my life." And if you are into classic Hollywood icons, amazing stories, and newly discovered insights, then hit that subscribe button. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers, and your support will mean a lot to our channel. Though she briefly enrolled in college to study education, hoping to become a teacher, her destiny tugged her elsewhere. She moved to New York City, full of determination, carrying little more than a suitcase and her voice. There, fate introduced her to saxophonist Julian Cannonball Adderley, who became both mentor and champion. "I knew the minute I heard her," Adderley later said, "that she had something rare. She could tell a whole story in a single line." Through his encouragement, Nancy auditioned for Capitol Records. In 1959, she signed her first major contract. From the start, executives didn't quite know how to categorize her. She wasn't just jazz, not fully R&B, and not quite pop. But Nancy herself was clear. "I never wanted to be put in a box. I wasn't just a singer. I was a storyteller." And with that, a new chapter began. A young woman from Ohio, with a honey-coated voice and a gift for storytelling, stepping into the world stage to become one of the most unforgettable vocalists of her generation. By the early 1960s, Nancy Wilson was no longer just a promising young voice. She was one of Capitol Records' brightest stars. Her first albums, Like in Love in 1959 and Something Wonderful in 1960, revealed her uncanny ability to move between genres, blending jazz phrasing, pop accessibility, and a touch of R&B. Critics quickly realized they weren't just hearing a singer, they were hearing a stylist. Her big breakthrough came with songs like Guess Who I Saw Today and Save Your Love for Me, both of which became signatures. In 1964, her recording of You Don't Know How Glad I Am won her a Grammy Award for Best R&B Recording, proof that she could dominate the charts while staying true to her jazz roots. As one critic put it, Nancy doesn't just sing a song, she lives inside it. But behind the gowns and the spotlight, Nancy was also a young mother. She had married drummer Kenny Dennis in 1960, and soon after they welcomed their son, Kenneth Jr. Nancy later admitted, "I was living two lives at once, the stage star and the mom with a baby on her hip." Her marriage to Dennis eventually strained under the weight of constant touring and the demands of fame. They divorced in 1970, leaving Nancy to juggle single motherhood while continuing to record and perform at a relentless pace. Yet her determination to keep her family close never wavered. She once said, "The applause is sweet, but hearing my child call me mommy, that's the sound that keeps me grounded." In 1973, she remarried Reverend Wiley Burton, a Presbyterian minister, and together they had two daughters, Samantha and Sheryl. This new family dynamic brought stability, but also new challenges. Nancy adjusted her touring schedule so she could attend school recitals and birthdays, determined that her daughters wouldn't feel overshadowed by her career. "I wanted them to know they always came first," she explained. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Nancy continued to rise, releasing albums, winning more awards, and even branching into television. She hosted The Nancy Wilson Show, which earned an Emmy in 1968, and made guest appearances on series such as Hawaii Five-0 and The Cosby Show. Yet through it all, she reminded interviewers that her proudest productions weren't her records, they were her kids. By the 1990s, Nancy Wilson had already become a legend. With over 50 albums recorded, 3 Grammy Awards, and a career that spanned jazz, R&B pop, and even television, she was celebrated as one of the most versatile vocalists of her generation. She earned the title Song Stylist because she could take any piece of music, a standard, a ballad, even a pop tune, and make it entirely her own. But as her career entered its later chapters, Nancy made a conscious choice to step back and devote more time to her family. She slowed her touring schedule, focusing instead on special performances and recordings that mattered most to her. In 1999, she received the NAACP Image Award for Best Jazz Vocal Album, and in 2005 she took home another Grammy for RSVP, Rare Songs, Very Personal. Yet she reminded fans that awards were not the measure of her life. "My real legacy," she said in a 2008 interview, "is in the children I raised and the love we shared." Sheryl Burton. Nancy Wilson's journey into motherhood began in the 1960s, during her marriage to drummer Kenny Dennis. Together they adopted a baby girl named Sheryl. At that time, Nancy's star was shining brighter than ever. She was performing across the country, topping the charts, and stunning audiences with her elegance and voice. But even with the fame, Nancy later reflected, "Being a mother grounded me when the world wanted me to be everywhere at once." Sheryl grew up in Los Angeles, surrounded by music legends who were regular guests in her home. Despite the glamorous environment, she never pursued show business herself. Instead, she lived a private life, away from cameras and microphones. It is believed that Sheryl later became a mother herself, which meant Nancy enjoyed one of her favorite roles, grandmother. Family friends recall Nancy proudly saying that she loved spoiling the grandkids more than any audience ever applauded me. Samantha Burton. In 1975, Nancy's family grew again. With her second husband, Reverend Wiley Burton, she gave birth to Samantha Burton. At the time, Nancy was balancing concerts, studio sessions, and acting roles. Yet she always reminded herself that nothing mattered more than family. "Motherhood was my true encore," she once said. "The one performance that mattered more than any ovation." Samantha grew up in a household where faith and music coexisted. Her father was a minister, and her mother was a global music icon. Though she avoided the spotlight, she supported her mother's legacy quietly, appearing at some public tributes and memorials after Nancy's passing. Like her sister, Samantha is also believed to have children of her own, extending the Wilson family tree. Through them, Nancy's love and lessons continue into a new generation. Kenneth Casey, Dennis Jr. Nancy's only son, Kenneth Dennis Jr., often called Casey, was born in the late 1960s during her marriage to Kenny Dennis. His arrival came during a period when Nancy was at the height of her career, releasing chart-topping albums and winning Grammys. Yet she always came back to her children as her compass. "My children," she said, "were always my true north." Casey grew up with music all around him, but chose not to follow his mother onto the stage. Instead, he built a quieter life, away from the pressures of celebrity. Casey also became a father, giving Nancy yet another grandchild to adore. Those close to her say Nancy lit up whenever she spoke about her grandchildren, often calling them "my sweetest encore." Her children each took their own path away from the shadow of her fame. Kenneth Jr. pursued a private life, choosing not to live in the spotlight. Samantha and Sheryl also built lives outside of music, focusing on family, education, and careers that gave them stability. Nancy often said she respected their decisions, explaining, "They didn't have to be me. They had to be themselves." In her later years, Nancy cherished her role as a grandmother, spending as much time as possible with her grandchildren. Friends recalled how her house, once filled with rehearsals and musicians, became a quieter place, where the sound of jazz was replaced with the laughter of kids running through the halls. Nancy Wilson passed away on December 13, 2018, at the age of 81, after a long illness. She died peacefully at her home in Pioneer Town, California, surrounded by family. The news sent ripples through the music world, with tributes pouring in from fellow artists and fans alike. Jazz legend Herbie Hancock called her a storyteller whose every note carried truth, while her children described her as a mother who gave us love in abundance, even when the world demanded so much of her. She was laid to rest in her home state of Ohio, the place where her journey had begun. Even today, her legacy is honored through tributes, concerts, and the continued influence she has on singers across genres. Her voice lives on in recordings, but perhaps more importantly, her spirit lives on in her children and grandchildren, who carry forward not just her music, but her values of resilience, love, and authenticity. Nancy Wilson's life was a story of elegance, resilience, and timeless music, but her greatest legacy may live on in her children and grandchildren, who continue to carry her values and her love forward. What do you think? Is Nancy Wilson's true legacy the awards and recordings that shaped generations of musicians, or the family she built and protected behind the spotlight? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoy discovering the untold stories of music legends, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next one.